Hello, I'm Bill Harroff. This is Charlotte Johnson, and welcome to our exhibition at the St. Louis Public Library, the Central Express branch. And our show is, as you can see, Who Knows What Evil Lurks in the Hearts of Men and Women in St. Louis. So, our show, and there are multiple displays throughout the library, talk about the comic books that were burned and banned in the 1950s and why that's so relevant for today. And St. Louis was part of the hub of the burnings that were taking place around the country. They took place in Illinois and Missouri, and you see Kirk Allen here on this St. Louis Slow Democrat headline. They're looking scared of reading his own comic. Kirk Allen was the very first Superman that appeared in Superman serials back in the 30s and 40s. So what is this all about? Well, a man named Dr. Fredric Wertham and some colleagues of his got the American public and parents in an uproar. He said that comic books were responsible for juvenile delinquency, and that those kids went on crime sprees and sexual romps because they read comics. It sounds ludicrous, I know, but it's the same kind of arguments that are being made today over various kinds of publications. So what happened? He wrote a bestseller called Seduction of the Innocent. And again, he got the Roman Catholic Church, he got Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts all going and convinced these people that they should bring all their comic books, and the only good way of getting rid of anything is that, and I mean removing the possibility of having those things, was to burn them. Not to talk about it, not to say, kids, I don't want you to read these things. No, for everybody to just burn them so that they didn't exist. And that happened all across the country. We have the maps of where that took place. So with that popularity that he was drumming up, and of course he was selling more books, Mr. Wertham, if nothing else, was an egotistical person who was also a total snob. And so to him, comic books were bad just because they existed, because they didn't look good. He only believed in high art, like opera. And so, of course, oh, they were poorly written, oh, they were poorly drawn. Well, I defy you to see anything here that's poorly drawn. These are some of the most exquisite illustrators of the period. But what happened was, his book was so popular that he convinced the Senate to have hearings about juvenile delinquency linked to the comic books. And when he did that, they forced some of the creators to come and be interviewed by senators. And of course the senators were waiting in, lying in wait to talk with these people. And they did a pretty horrible job, the comic book creators did, of convincing anybody that they weren't just in it for the money. And I should remind people that in the 1950s, comic books were being sold millions of copies every month. Today, if a comic sells 10,000 issues, that's a surprise. Again, millions of copies back in the day, and there were hundreds and hundreds of titles being sold in the 50s. And today, oh, it's just a few dozen. And so when that all happened, the senators, in their wisdom, and I use that in quotes, in their wisdom decided, well, we need to have a comics code. And the comics code they created shut down the industry. This was a multi-million dollar business, putting printers, creators of all kinds that had worked for years and years and years, put them all out of business. Most of those people that were put out of business were Jewish veterans of World War II. So they didn't care about any of that. It was just banning. We'll just stop. We'll just put the industry so that there's no way you can scare people with crime comics or horror comics. So why should we care about it today? Well, it's because those same people with the same kind of twisted logic are still trying to ban comics today. And it's not just comics, of course. It's gaming, it's rap music, any kind of music. If you have a word that somebody doesn't like, they'll complain about it. If there's an image that looks in such a form, oh, that's sexualized now, we've got to stop that. Well, these were the kinds of arguments that were being made back in the 50s. And so it's so relevant today because comics remain the most banned publications in America, 75 years after the events of this. In a final note, I know that's just the gross overview. This show is dedicated to 3 of our friends that we met and I got to talk at length with that were all artists of the 50s and were still working into their 90s. And I was so thrilled, Shar and I both were, to meet all of these gentlemen. And I got drawing lessons even from each of them. But they told me their stories of the sad times they experienced. And the one gentleman, Vic Caraboda, his wife was newly pregnant. He was worried about paying the bills, and guess what? The whole industry dropped out from under him. And it was only Stan Lee that went to bat for him, that called a friend of his and said, this man is a good artist, you need to hire him. That he said, that's the only thing that saved me during this desperate time for creators. I pray it doesn't happen more here in the United States today. Thank you.